All right, welcome back to the channel. We got another great boxing talk topic today. Shawn Porter will be next in line for Errol Spence for the winner of Errol Spence Jr. Danny Garcia, not Manny Pacquiao, not Terence Crawford. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, good stuff. Shawn Porter, the beast that he is, according to reports, I can't say that I heard this. Someone else reported on this. I think it was like Boxing News. It wasn't Boxing News 24, but like Boxing Insider. And the title of the video and the little bit of the first part of it was that Shawn Porter believes that he's going to be next in line for Errol Spence Jr. after the Danny Garcia fight, if Errol Spence Jr. is able to beat him. And so I want to talk about the likelihood of that and what that means for what I believe that means for Shawn Porter and what I think that means for Terence Crawford. And I have a slightly, different view than I had before in the light of current events, with me understanding, well, I guess me really coming to grips with the role that Floyd Mayweather Jr. has in the PBC, as maybe an unofficial partner. However, I have to suspect the most dominant figure, period, in the PBC, even more influential and more powerful than Al Heyman within the PBC. So with that recognition, when I look at these fights and I talk about these fights, I have to take that into consideration now, just like I would take into consideration Bob Arum and Bob Arum's roles in fights being made by Top Rank, or Golden Boy's role in the pound for pound list, or the who the ring champion is according to Ring Magazine, right? When you're talking about fights being made, you have to include all of the players that are involved and assume that all of these people have interest. Take in consideration what their interests are and think about what their response would be, right? How does it affect each individual person's interest? And this one is this is interesting, man, because first of all, I think that it's true, and I could have told you that 3 weeks ago, right? Now, the reason that I would have said it would have been slightly different, but I still had the view that the WBC has now made Shawn Porter the number one challenger in the WBC. And Errol Spence Jr. is, of course, the WBC champion. Danny Garcia was fighting for the WBC belt and is now fighting Errol Spence Jr. again for the WBC belt. So let's look at this. How many times have Shawn Porter and Danny Garcia each fought for the WBC belt? Right? I think Danny got it against Robert Ghost Guerrero. He fought for it against Shawn Porter and lost, and now he's fighting Errol Spence Jr., right? How many times did Shawn get it? Shawn got it against, he fought for it. No, I don't think. Somebody have to remind me whether or not. I think he got the WB. He never fought for the WBC, but Shawn fought for the WBA, then against Keith Thurman, and then with Danny Garcia, he fought for the WBC, and now he's number one and in position to be named mandatory for the WBC again. So what it looks like to me is a little bit like there's the same kind of circle thing going on with the WBC. And that circle includes very good fighters in Shawn Porter, Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia, but that is the kind of circle they seem that they're running. And it was just much easier if you look down the road, it's just more logical for Terence Crawford. For Errol Spence Jr. to be put in a position of fighting Shawn Porter again, because that fight it did good pay-per-views, according to reports. All of this stuff you got to take as far as numbers and all that. You got to take it all with a grain of salt. Okay, like I just can't tell you how my perspective and how I look at this stuff. You can't, certain things you just cannot unsee. You know what I mean? Like, you just can't unsee. You just can't look at people the same way after you see something transpire in a certain way, because it just allows you to see how they might be involved in other things, right? So, yeah, I just think that Floyd Mayweather Jr. has a lot of influence with the WBC. I think he has a lot of influence. He like basically, obviously he's massively influenced within the PBC. So what would and he's also very instrumental in bringing out Errol Spence Jr. and letting Errol Spence Jr. get a reputation. Like he's, you know what I mean? That's part of that team over there, as I can see now. So it just makes it seem like it could be more of a top rankish type of move to cut anybody that is not either with either with the PBC or maybe with the PBC affiliated promotional company. And so I just don't see it, man. Like, and that's what the importance is with Errol Spence, with Terence Crawford, man. And the importance in Terence Crawford really trying to fight guys, right? Really saying that he wants to fight. Never say you don't want to fight. You know what I mean? Even if you don't believe the shit's gonna happen, dude, you've got to say you want to fight. Because if you don't, you're gonna get framed for a duck. You know what I mean? Whether it's true or not. And if the bulk of public opinion, in the bulk of not public opinions, public opinion, the bulk of the publicly known information points to a duck, then you're going to be in a duck storm. So, and that's the duck storm Terence Crawford is in. And I don't see a way for him to get out of that unless he is willing to really go to fight and start knocking out, like honestly demanding to fight these guys. Otherwise, dude, Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, there's a big call for Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter. Dude, there can be a lot. Like, I don't see Terence Crawford, other than Errol Spence Jr. saying that he really wants that fight. I don't see Terence Crawford being able to jump over there, wait for Errol Spence Jr. to win all the belts, and then in the last pay-per-view fight, honestly think that he is going to come and snatch all those belts if he is not willing to sign with Floyd Mayweather, either Floyd Mayweather Jr. or something influenced by Floyd Mayweather Jr. So I don't see it, especially because Terence Crawford is the type of guy, man, who is of the athleticism. He has that great athleticism. There's a lot of people that think he's the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. I don't think that, I just don't see that. Even if everybody wanted to do it, that you would have to overcome an objection by Floyd Mayweather Jr. And I guess that's probably the best way to say why I think that this Shawn Porter fight is more than likely going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised I'm not surprised if what was said on this website, is validated, can be validated somewhere else. I wouldn't even be surprised if that was offered, that was offered to Shawn Porter, because it makes more sense. Because in the case that Shawn Porter beats Errol Spence Jr., the belts all still stay with the PBC. In the case that he beats, in case Errol Spence Jr. wins, it's still all with the PBC. If Terence Crawford goes over there and fight, it's not all with the PBC. It goes all to Top Rank, all to Bob Arum. So what Bud is going to have to do is Bud is going to either have to continue to fight like, this next fight, which could very well be a rematch with Aegis Kalvanakis. Could easily be a fight with Aegis Kalvanakis, right? I've heard different media outlets, which are, really just like, they're asking questions to act like, to get somebody to make a response so that then you can make an article saying it, then people can report on it, and then people start talking about it, and they use that talk as a way to justify it. Don't be surprised if ESPN and Top Rank doesn't try to get you a Terence Crawford Aegis Kalvanakis fight. It's clear that they don't really care about his reputation, so they very well may run with that. Yeah, man, it's going to be a good thing. Now, the wonderful thing about this is, as far as boxing goes, the politics of this are just the politics. It really doesn't matter, because in the WBC, within that particular area, we all pretty much believe and understand that those are the top welterweights, with the exception of Terence Crawford, right? But We got to call it like it is, man. But I'm not going to, I doubt very much that I'm going to I'm going to support the fight. I want Shawn Porter to fight. I think Shawn Porter deserves the rematch. And based off of the people that each guy has fought, I mean, he probably doesn't deserve it, in front of a Terence Crawford fight. Wow, man, it's just interesting stuff. So we'll see what happens. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Do you think that what do you think about my take on the circumstance? And with that, I'm out. Peace.